Jim Gerrish, you're here.
Hi,
It is, al-
Jared.
it is always good to see when the presenter shows up. We are
Oh,
great.
yeah.
We're grateful for that.
Yeah. My,
Um,
my apologies for lagging a little. As I've
mm,
indicated, we've just been in the process of moving, and up until the time I sat down in this chair, I was involved with the moving part of my life rather than,
I got
being
you.
here. I apologize for that. But now
That
I'm
is
here.
okay. That is okay. That is okay. Margot assured me that you were on your way, so we had a backup plan, but you were here. We're grateful. Where did you move to?
We moved out of the Samurai Valley over a mountain range into the Big Lost Valley. So a lot of the viewers probably know or have talked with our son Galen, who runs the product side of
Yeah.
American Grazing Land Services. We're now just 20 minutes away from uh, the business warehouse and his location with two of our grandkids there. I hate to say it, but we're at a point in life that we needed to move a little closer to civilization. So
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, we're grateful to have you here. I've known Jim Gerrish for nearly 2 decades. He's been on a ranch. I've spent time with him and attended classes and workshops that he's done. I'm grateful for the value that he adds. Is probably, well, I don't know if you were necessarily ahead of your time necessarily, but now grazing is mainstream and probably was fringy when you started teaching, and it's good to see. It's good to see that now people are recognizing the role of ruminants and grazing management in the regenerative movement and regenerative agriculture. And so you've definitely been a pioneer in this, and we appreciate you coming to this. Tell us what we're going to learn here today, Jim. You
well,
want to give an overview, or you want to just jump right in?
probably we should just jump right in because if I
Okay.
gave an overview in 5 minutes, why would they listen to me for another 45?
Okay, sounds
All right.
good.
So, shall I go to share screen now then?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. First, thank you for your kind words, Jared, about our past association and, you know, glorifying my great age these days that I've been involved in grazing for over 40 years now. And so I started back in the 20th century, went to the 21st century now. And I have seen a lot of changes over my lifetime. Now, I wasn't around in 1874. I'm not quite that old. But back in those days, that's when kind of our ranching tradition in North America, because I would, bring Mexico and Canada, into kind of the same time frame and relationship that American ranchers have with their land and livestock. When this first started, if you had a little bit of cow savvy and you were good in the saddle, you could be profitable ranching in the plains and the western U.S. There's a lot of folks went out there and just kind of set up shop, and you could do it that time, and you could establish what has become what we call the legacy ranches. Now, a lot of those legacy ranches have in fact changed hands. We came into the 20th century ranching in a way that was very similar to the mid to late 1800s when ranching started in the western US, western Canada, and parts of Mexico. And it was still a resource based business. Now, we started putting some fences on the landscape and defining, what was your ranch, what was my ranch, rather than open range country. Um, but there were other things came along and started changing things. We had the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. And even though we very much think about farmland in particularly the southern Great Plains being degraded in the Dust Bowl. But there are grazing lands throughout the central and western U.S. that suffered at that time. And then we began not only working from the back of a horse, but some people had tractors, and they started working the land to plant improved range species rather than working with the native lands. And the really big change in the ranching as an industry, I would say, occurred post-World War II. A lot of things happened post-World War II that led us to a ranching business that was built more on inputs, fossil fuel inputs, equipment, making hay rather than grazing most of the year, trucks, three-wheelers. Yeah, for you young ranchers, believe it or not, before we had, four-wheelers, quads, and side-by-sides, we had three-wheelers, which are, basically just very dangerous tricycles because you can move so much faster on there. But overall, economics was changing from post-World War II to the 1970s. We just saw tremendous change in ranching. We had in the early 1970s, and a lot of people don't realize what we had in the early 1970s. I'm going to come back to that. But, we look at traditions in ranching, and we're very proud of our traditions, and, we strive to maintain them. I talk to, ranchers around the West who say their main goal is to maintain the ranching tradition. The kids still learn to ride about the same time that they learn to walk, they learn to rope and do all of those things. And so we have fourth and fifth generation ranchers out there that are learning some of those traditions. They're learning how to ride, but are they learning how to manage a business in this changing climate? There's, I have the pleasure to work with a lot of intergenerational family ranches and farms all across the U.S. I also have to endure some of the painful things that come along with intergenerational ranching. If you're, the youngest generation who's actually working on the ranch or the farm, you are probably operating within your parents' paradigms of the industry, of the economy. And sometimes the younger generation wants to tell the parents that, hey, we got to do something different. And this is one of the strifes in an intergenerational family business, is telling your parents or your grandparents that we got to do something differently, because it's basically interpreted as telling the previous generation that the choices that they made were wrong. Those choices may have been right at the time it was first made, right in the context of the economics of that time. Another one of the great challenges that we have is generating enough revenue to support multiple families, multiple generations. And, when Jared first talked to me about speaking in this virtual conference, he says, it's how do you build a legacy business? How do you build a business that can continue through the upcoming generations? And of course, one of the biggest challenges is off of this fixed piece of land generating additional revenue, because every time we add a family to the business, we're adding a demand for greater revenue. And then through those generations, we also have this point of transferring assets. How do you build the estate? How do you build all these intergenerational connections of asset transfer? This is, especially if you have a family, and we're going to say there's 3 siblings in the generation that's going to inherit. One of them stays on the ranch, 2 go off and have, businesses elsewhere, jobs, lives elsewhere. What is the fairness of how assets get distributed? That's a tough question that all of us in this business have to address. And then we have this one, the keeping the peace. And that keeping the peace basically takes everything we've talked about above and is an effort to maintain civility through the whole process of creating a new business, transferring assets, getting the previous generations to accept that we need to operate differently. Okay, so I want to come back, and I'm not going to address all of these things because we don't have 3 days. I'm going to kind of focus on paradigms, I think, and changing them. So this is why operating in your parents' paradigms rarely works. We have the habit of remembering those few very, very good years that we experienced in ranching. And so we think, if I do that again, what I did in that year, this will work. Well, if we're in a multi-generational business, very often those best years that we're looking at happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and we still think that that same situation is going to happen again, and we can capitalize on it. So this is the point. Making the business choices in 1973 that we did, it wasn't because we were stupid. It wasn't wrong choices. It's just the times have changed. We do not operate any longer in an era of cheap land, cheap fuel, cheap labor, and relatively speaking, high cattle prices. We have flip-flopped on that, and we'll see there. Now, we can look at the general economy, all aspects of business that take place in our nation, in our states, in our local communities. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, but the overall economy and culture changes a lot faster than what it does within our own family. We look around us and we see people doing different and say, oh yeah, that's fine. They can do that. That's their choice. But by God, we're not going to do that because we have a tradition on this ranch and we're going to adhere to that tradition. And that, quite frankly, is what sinks a lot of businesses, is somehow believing that we on our ranch are different from the overall economy. We have to adapt to that. Now, I said things have changed. So let's think about what it is that has changed. Oh, there's that line too. We still advance one funeral at a time. Sad to say, but it's the state that a lot of us exist in. All right, so what has changed? I want to talk about the economic climate. And I referred to 1973, and 1973 was a significant year. For one thing, it's the year I graduated from high school. And my high school graduation present was one of the very first Vermeer 605C balers in the state of Illinois. We paid $4,200 for that baler in 1973. State-of-the-art, new piece of equipment. I mean, we were high-tech. We'd been in the custom haymaking business for several years with little square balers. But in 1973, we made this change to the big round baler, $4,200. Hopefully there's a lot of people on this webinar that are quite a bit younger than, what I am. And hopefully you don't remember 1973. Now, there's some older people here who probably remember 1973. We hit an all-time record high cattle price. Does this sound familiar? Aren't we hearing that right now? We're having record high cattle prices. Well, 1973, we had the all-time record high cattle price of $54 a hundredweight. Wow. We'd all be going broke and starving if we were dealing with cattle prices in that area these days. So some other things that happened in 1973, just to give perspective here, because this was the highest price ever, we had the housewife beef boycott, where normal American, mothers, housewives were picketing at the grocery stores saying the price of beef was too high to feed their family. President Nixon capped beef prices. President Nixon stopped all beef exports out of the United States. By the way, 1 year later, in 1974, fed cattle were worth 19 cents a pound. To this day, that 1973, in real dollars, inflation-adjusted dollars, that 1973 $54 hundredweight is still the highest cattle price we have ever experienced. The decline in price from July of 1973 to July of 1974 is still the steepest 12-month drop we have ever experienced in cattle prices. Shows what the intervention of the government in the market will do for you. All right, let's move on. 2014, once again, we had an all-time, and most of you people on this seminar probably remember that high price, $178 a hundredweight, biggest price we've ever had, unless we think about inflation. In that year, you could buy a 605M baler for about $40,000. 2023, and because 2024 isn't over, I can't use 2024 numbers, but in 2023, Premier baler would cost about $65,000. A used big square baler, $190,000. Fed cattle hit a 192 in 2023. All-time record high cattle price, right? Well, let's look at 1973 compared to 2023. And we're just these are nominal dollars here. So this is the actual dollars of the day. The cost of that big round hay baler has increased almost 1,500%. Diesel fuel, 2,500%. Farm labor, 1,000%. Fertilizer, 800%. When we started doing custom big bales in 1973, $6 a hundredweight, $6 a bale is what we charged. In 2023, the national average of custom baled large round bale was still just $14, only 133% increase. We look at those record high cattle prices going from $54 a hundredweight to 192, 255%. You can see that the cost of our inputs has gone up, 5 to 10 times the rate that the value of our product has. A business model built on cheap land, cheap equipment, cheap fuel, cheap labor that worked in 1973 doesn't work in 2024 because the basic relationship between the cost of the inputs and the value of the product has declined so significantly. Now let's look at that inflation factor. There is a general rate of inflation through the entire economy. And you can look that up online for, from clear back into the 1920s and see what the annual rate of inflation has been. So if we look at what the price of inputs and products should be, if the only thing that happened from 1973 to 2023 was 50 years of inflation, what we would see is that big round baler today should only cost about $29,000, not 65. Diesel fuel should be $1.17, farm labor $8.79, nitrogen fertilizer 53 cents, which ironically, that's about where nitrogen fertilizer is right now. It's the only thing that is costing what it should. That guy making a large round bale of hay, you should be paying him $41 a bale to be on parity with 1973. And fed cattle today should be $370 a hundredweight to be on par with that record high price that we had in 1973. So the cost of our inputs have increased at much greater than the inflation rate, and the value of our products have not remotely kept up with inflation. Once again, a business model built on cheap land, cheap equipment, cheap fuel, cheap labor, cheap feed, cheap isn't going to work anymore because the value of our product is way below what the economy says it should be. And that's what I just said. I've done consulting work in 43 of the US states, I think 4 Canadian provinces, and Chihuahua, the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. And I see overcapitalization in equipment and facilities, but primarily in equipment. It is what breaks the back of way too many ranches. We just own way more equipment than the number of cows the ranch will support can ever pay for. When you get down to it, and I know Jamie has talked about this, I suspect several other speakers, or Jaime rather, and I'm pretty sure several other speakers will touch on this same concept, that the only real ingredients that it takes for making meat, milk, and fiber are solar energy, carbon dioxide, water, and soil minerals. And if we build our business around those inputs, then we are far more likely to have a profitable business. It's not that these inputs are free, because remember, we have to have the land there to be the solar collector, to be the water catchment basin. We have to have the soil there to grow feed for the livestock. So these are not free ingredients because they're all associated with possessing or controlling land. And so our management isn't, in ranching, should not be about manipulating inputs. Do I put on 40 units of nitrogen or do I put on 60 units of nitrogen? Do I use Merck brand Ivamec or do I use a generic Ivamec? Those little decisions like that, they are never going to make you a profitable business by worrying about tiny little crap like that. It is the big picture of managing for effective solar energy flow, functional water cycle, dynamic mineral cycles, and broad biodiversity across, over and under the soil surface on your ranch. That is where profitability is going to be built. Now, if we were in a small face-to-face workshop, this is where I would ask you to write out a cow's job description. I view every animal on the ranch as being an employee, and we need to have an understanding of what our employees' jobs are. This is what I put on the position description of a cow. Rustle her own grub, find the best bite of feed she can, deliver a live calf every 12 months, bring a live calf to the weaning pen, stay healthy without a lot of fuss, mow weeds, fertilize pastures, plant seeds, till grounds, and very importantly, come to work with a positive attitude every day. That's the cow's job. Most of our neighbors who are in the ranching business, they're doing these jobs for the cow. They're working for the cows. The cows are supposed to be working for the ranch. If you are working for the cows on a daily basis, they don't make good business decisions, and they will not lead you to profitability. The role of the manager is to create a working environment where our employees can thrive. So our job is to take our ranch resources and set up the environment so that that cow can be the very best cow possible. Now, I've never seen a cow knock a fence down and set it back up. So we do need to maintain ranch infrastructure. And then the piece that so many of us hate, market ranch products. Just don't throw the calves on the trailer, take them to town, and call that marketing. We need to market ranch products and plan, adapt, and replan. Okay, so we're in a different economic time. We need to have a different business model. We also have a changing environmental climate, and some people, don't want to believe this, and they have their notions on it. I'm going to give you my notion on it. And I know Roger Savory is on this program, and it wouldn't surprise me if he says something about this also. And that is desertification. Now, the Webster definition of desertification is the process by which fertile land becomes desert, typically as a result of drought, deforestation, or inappropriate agriculture. All right? I'm going to give a little different definition. And we talk a lot about soil carbon these days. Desertification is basically the loss of carbon from the soil. The fact that we have all of that, a lot more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than we used to, I'm way more concerned that our problem is fundamentally because we don't have it in the soil, not because it's up in the air. It's because we don't have it in the soil. So let's think about human-induced climate change. And we're going to go back to ancient times, to this area in the Middle East, Near East, that was called the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, also called the cradle of civilization and the birthplace of agriculture. There's the kiss of death right there. The problem in this area is they started 7,000 years ago degrading the land, probably longer than that. That area, and I suspect there are some of our listeners who are veterans of the first Gulf War and then the Iraq War, and you have been in those deserts. Our son Galen was a Marine, 3 tours in Iraq when it wasn't much fun to be there. And it is hot, it is dry, it is dusty. A lot of really productive land is no longer productive. And it is thanks to humans. It is thanks to the birthplace of agriculture, not understanding resource management, but trying to feed a growing population. Now, that population wasn't growing as fast in, 2000 BC as it is in 2080. And so what we've really been able to do is accelerate our ability. With industrial agriculture, we've accelerated our ability to degrade land. So from 1970 to 2020, so again, a 50-year time span, the annual rate of desertification has increased 35 to 40%. In 2023, 30 million acres. That's an area the size of the state of Pennsylvania turned into a desert in a single year by human activity. Since 1950, 35% of the world's arable land has been degraded due to erosion of topsoil. As I said, carbon dioxide levels have increased from 270 parts per million, and we usually use 1870 as the reference point, to over 415 in 2023. And again, it depends on what carbon models you look at, but that increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not just because we burn fossil fuels. Depending on which models you look at, 30 to 50% of that is due to soil degradation, human-induced climate change because of our poor management of the landscape. It is a reality, and you need to learn to live with it. And as I said, it is the loss of carbon from the soil, the absence of carbon from the soil, that is the greater problem, in my view, than the fact that it's in the atmosphere. You know what? It might warm up another 10 degrees Celsius in the next 50 years. You know what? We'll survive. There's a lot of things that won't, but Homo sapiens as a species will survive because we'll adapt and change. A lot of us will die. That's life. All right. So elevated carbon dioxide may increase global temperatures. It also makes photosynthesis more efficient. We hear that as a talking point from some people a lot. Oh, don't worry about it. It's better for the plants. What they miss is the obvious and well-documented effects of decreased soil carbon levels, which is reduced microbial life, reduced nutrient holding capacity, reduced resistance to compaction, reduced water infiltration rate, reduced water holding capacity, reduced soil resilience. And you know what all of that is? Increased desertification. And you know what? That ain't Arizona right there, folks. That is Missouri. The Garden of Eden of grazing. Green, lush grasslands. It rains 38 to 40 inches a year. But if you've reduced carbon from the soil, diminished microbial function, you can take a garden spot like Missouri and turn it into a desert. That's the power of humans. So climate change is not causing the loss of soil carbon. Loss of soil carbon causes climate change. And we as a species have been doing this for thousands of years. We probably need to change that pattern. And guess what? And there's, other people in this group who, say it on other formats. Some people have been saying it for years, but this is where we are. Restoring healthy soils and healthy grasslands is the key to climate health. We have more power as farmers and ranchers to make a positive impact on the health of our climate than almost any other sector. I mean, unless we quit driving cars and trucks and don't use fossil fuels and we don't have electricity and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, we can do away with all that. But we who manage the land, we have the greatest opportunity to make a difference. And if you think about what constitutes healthy soils, generally there's three components of soil quality and health to talk about. Chemical composition. And when I was in, college, university, undergraduate, graduate school in the 1970s, these are things we talked about. Sufficiency level. Is there enough of this mineral in the soil? The balance of minerals. And then we had soil physics, physical structure, aeration, hydrology, all of those. And I had several courses in each of these topics. I had one course in soil biology in 1970s. And I remember two things. Nitrogen fixation by rhizobium bacteria is a wonderful thing. And if we didn't have soil microbes to degrade corn stalks, Illinois would have been buried in 40 foot of corn stalks. That's all I got out of soil biology as it was taught in the 1970s. Now, this is the fastest growing part of agricultural science here in the 21st century is soil biology. Now we talk about the need for having a diversity of organisms, functionality of organisms, and rather than thinking of organic matter as, dead old carbon, it is living dynamic, the soil microbial biomass. So we are changing soil science. It's getting a lot more fun. When I was in school in the 70s, we were taught, think about it as the three-leg stool concept. So if you have a three-leg stool, those legs have to be of equal length in order to be able to sit on it. So soil quality, we didn't even use the soil health term in the 1970s. Soil quality rests on top of that stool. And the legs, of course, are the physical, chemical, and biological components of the soil. And we were told that they are all equally important and we need to treat them with equal concern. But what post-World War II industrial agriculture did was altered the chemical nature of the soil, aggressively attacked the physical structure of the soil with tillage, and those killed, shortened, diminished, killed the biological leg of the stool. And so the whole thing went out of whack. And so now we are back trying to restore the biological component of the soil. So like in 4th or 5th grade, we all learned about photosynthesis. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, water from the soil, solar energy hitting the leaf, boom, we make sugar, we create energy, the basis of basically all life on Earth. We always knew that there was a below ground part of the plant, the roots, but we really didn't know a lot about what went on there. If we think about the knowledge base as it is increased in the last 2 decades, so in the 21st century, we now understand that within 48 hours of a sugar molecule being created in photosynthesis, 30 to 60% of the energy created by that plant has actually flowed through the root system. I think if I had said flown, it would have to be up in the air. It has flowed through the root system to support and feed the symbiosis with the soil biome and the microorganisms there. They're bringing minerals into the plant. They're protecting against pathogenic bacteria, fungi, virus, all of those things. So the new view of the 3 components of the soil is now a pyramid, not that stool, it's a pyramid with soil biology, the broad, solid base of soil functionality. And then we know that by organic matter, biological function alters the physical state of the soil. If you want to store more water in a sand, how do we do it? You increase organic matter. If you want to open up a clay soil to get better water infiltration, how do you do it? You increase organic matter. And we now know that most of the chemical transfers, the mineral processes in the soil, those are all microbial moderated functions there. And so we got to have functional biology to have productive agricultural soils. And that, fortunately, a lot of people have seen the light, and that's the direction a big component of agriculture is trying to move, some at a snail's pace, some more rapidly, but that's where we're going. And let me go the other way. We have pasture and we have rangeland. And last time I gave this talk, I was in more of a pasture environment, so I haven't switched out this slide. But when we think about what is excellent pasture, it's high in energy, adequate in protein, mineral rich, species diverse, palatable, and durable. Well, you can say the same sort of thing about rangeland. There's just not as much of it, and it happens at a slower pace. But excellent pasture, it doesn't just happen by accident. We have to create it. It is our management efforts. We strive to create that excellent pasture. We strive to create healthier, more productive rangeland. Those are keys to where our management is taking us. So we come back to this idea of regenerative grazing. It's a solution to most of our environmental challenges. Increasing photosynthesis. That means we are capturing more carbon every square yard, every square acre, across the entire landscape. If we can increase photosynthesis, we're drawing excess carbon out of the atmosphere, putting it back into the soil where it will better serve us to support soil health, biodiversity, the water cycle, reduce fertilizer use, and eliminate, I say most pesticides. I'm not prepared, for everybody in every situation to say there is no place to ever use a synthetic herbicide or insecticide It's a tool to have in the toolbox when you're trying to get past a particular obstacle. Management will take care of most of it, but sometimes we still need a little extra kick. And if we get all of this working, then we have profitable land stewardship. And that profitable land stewardship is what allows families to stay on the landscape. Now, we have a third component that we need to think about. And that is, we live in a different social climate than what we had in the 1970s. Do you get tired of hearing about crisis? Every day on the news, it seems like, oh, we have this crisis, we have that crisis. We just live in a constant state of crisis. And it gets a little hard to deal with sometimes. We just want to tune it out. I think we do have some real crises, though. And here's a picture. I don't know, why I do this one. We are in a health crisis for our personal health. What I should have is just a picture of, someone there. No, the solution is someone there eating real food. Yeah, we got to do this testing stuff to show that we have this crisis. But we have personal health crisis in this country. And back in the days when Obamacare was being created and everybody was talking about the health care crisis, we have a health crisis that's way more serious than the health care crisis. We have a health crisis for our communities. Most of us live in on this webinar, not most of us in this country, very few of the people in this country live in small communities. A lot of us on this webinar live in or near small communities, and they're failing. And we have this health crisis for an environment. And I've already talked about this one. It's largely driven by the depletion of carbon from the soil. We are in a trust crisis. You hear these things on the news and you can just read them down there. We just don't seem to trust anybody anymore. And one of the really bad pieces of it is trust in farmers and ranchers is at an all-time low. We used to be the good guys. For years and years and years, farmers and ranchers had a higher trust level by the general population than the government, the news media, medical profession, any of that. We don't have that anymore. Most of our customers, most consumers in this country do not think that we are producing healthy food. They do not think we are taking care of the environment. They do not think that we are managing the land in a healthy and effective way. We are losing this battle. And part of the reason we're losing this battle is because we're to blame. Agriculture overall, and I know I'm not supposed to criticize a farmer with food in my mouth. We all have to stick together because it's us, that less than 2% of the population that's actual farmers and ranchers against everybody else. We're at fault. We have made a lot of bad choices as an industry over the years. I personally, in land management, which I have been involved in, for most of my life, I have made some bad choices, but I'm ready to do something different. Yeah, here it is. Meat killing us all and destroying the planet, and yet frosted mini wheats are now considered a health food by a lot of organizations. I don't get it. You can pick and choose stuff out of government reports to support whatever view you want. I like this one because it supports my view. I think it's every 10 years. It might be every 5 years. CDC puts out a State of the Nation's Health report. In 2010, they said 75% of all medical costs in the U.S. can be directly attributed to dietary choices. Now, a lot of the premises they were using were wrong to that, but I think this is absolutely true. Most of our ill health is attributed to what we eat. We eat a lot of really crappy food. And that's one of the bad choices we, as the agricultural industry, extending into the food processing industry, has made. You know, smoking is way, way down the list now as health risk factors because so many people have quit smoking, but they still eat crappy food. Now, most people on this webinar probably already recognize that the dead soil phenomena is a cause of a lot of our unhealthy food. So how did we get to this position? And I put it right here. Largely, we forgot that we are a part of nature, not apart from nature. We live in this world. We live with all the creatures, other creatures out here. We live with the plants that grow here. We live with the soil that is under our feet. And a whole lot of the soil isn't healthy. The plant communities on them aren't healthy. The livestock on them aren't healthy. But we have the choice. We have the opportunity to make all those things healthier. And that'll ripple effect into our broader communities and the broader environment. Now, the consumers that are out there, I said, as farmers and ranchers, their trust level in us to do the right thing is at an all-time low. And in my view, one of the first steps to moving forward is when we are willing to admit that we have made a mistake, that we have made some bad choices, and that we need to go a different direction. So as land managers, as the agriculturalists here in the 21st century, we need to recognize our health, our communities, our environment, the future generations. We have had some negative impacts in the past, but there is that saying that today is the first day of the rest of your life. For everybody out here, today is the first day of the rest of your life. It is the opportunity to do something to make a difference. Now, farms and ranches, we produce food, right? That's our main business. Society as a whole is asking for more. And if we can do some of these additional things, it brings their trust and confidence level back up. Open spaces. I mean, if I look at agricultural units, and I'm not going to say farms and ranches, I'm going to say agricultural units, you know, that have hurricane fence with the leaning out triple barbed wire and biohazard signs and no admittance all over. I don't want to eat the crap that they're making in those places. Open door. Why? I mean, if we're doing something that we don't want our customers to see, you're really restricting your customer base, but you're also probably doing something that is not beneficial for your health, their health, the community health, or environmental health. Recreational ranching, you know, there are people who will pay money to come spend a day doing your chores for you. Capitalize on it. Let those people see what a day in the life of the farmer or rancher is, and they see everything that you're doing. And if you're doing appropriate things, it raises the trust level. Most farms and ranches have some aspect of well, I shouldn't say that. We have a lot of neighbors who don't have any wildlife on their places, don't we? Because of their farming practices. Now, some of us, you know, like to kill and eat the wildlife that runs around on the place. Some people just want to see it, and they will pay money to come and see the birds, to come and see the deer, the elk, the butterflies, the hoot owls, all those things. To society as a whole, we have environmental services that we can provide. Some of us are already doing a real good job of it, some less so. But carbon sequestration, watershed management, pollinator habitat, and again, those non-game species for bird watching stuff. We can make all of these positive effects on the land. And the really great thing about it is they also make a positive effect on the bottom line of the ranch. Even if all you do is run the livestock, putting more carbon into the soil, maintaining a healthier, more biodiverse plant community, just on ranching alone, it improves the bottom line. There's some people in this group who are direct marketing consumers. They have made that choice to sell food, not commodities. There's a lot more profit potential in the selling of food rather than just commodities. And then the other thing that we have here is our story that we can sell and tell and sell. I guess we have to tell it and then sell it. Maybe you sell it and tell it, but you get it. People want to know what it's like to be out here, what it is to manage the land, what it is that you believe in to create personal health, community health, environmental health, their health. They want to know.
About 8 minutes left, Jim.
I got it.
Great.
So the last item I have on here comparing 2024 to 1973 is technology. We have some interesting things that have come along on the technology side. And again, we're not going to go into all of these because we don't, have another half day to do it. But from a landscape management business or aspect or a livestock management aspect, virtual fencing, remote health monitoring through collars or ear tags for the livestock. We have a number of different GIS, geographic information system, tools available to help us with landscape evaluation, make better management choices. Drones. I mean, there's so many jobs that you can get quickly done on the ranch if you send a drone out to look at something rather than you having to drive or ride over there. As long as you have cellular service, we can have a control for our center pivot, stock water pumps, fence, energizers, just all kinds of stuff can be managed through the cell phone. The grazing management software, there's a lot of packages available that make record keeping, feed projection, stocking rate decisions much more easier to do. And here we all sit in the middle of a day with continuing education online. We did not have to all pack up and go to Reno and spend the money to get there, eat that expensive restaurant food. I mean, when I'm done here, I'll just eat the cheap home lunch. I think one of the most powerful things that has come along in the last 10 years is simply YouTube. All of these videos of different things that you can do. And, we used to think it was just the younger guys doing it. I've seen plenty of, 70-plus-year-old ranchers whipping their phone out, pulling up a YouTube video and say, well, this is what they did. And I was wondering if I could, oh, yeah. Some people don't do it. And then again, through social media, this networking with like-minded managers. So I think kind of wrapping it up here, 21st century ranch manager, it isn't just riding a horse and playing with the dogs. There's some big things we need to do. If we're going to effectively manage in this century, you got to recognize that agriculture has to change because it has been a problem. And I say in environmental degradation here, but also in community loss as we have gotten more and more consolidated in agriculture. So what the consumer wants for us is not excuses of why we've done what we've done, but solutions of what we're doing today and we're going to do tomorrow to make this a better place. Health. Well, that's what I said. I should have pushed the button sooner. And then, these technologies that I've talked about, you don't have to use every one of them, but be aware of what's out there. Get yourself to where you have a little bit of tech savvy, at least, to where you can capitalize on having some of these options available. And we need to become more analytical in our thinking. Farming and ranching, just doing the same thing year after year after year after year because 20 years ago that worked, isn't going to do it. We need to know how to collect meaningful data, analyze it, plan based on that, manage, monitor our results, and then adapt to the next round. We need to be business people, not just glorified cowboys. All right. So, challenges are great today, but opportunities have never been greater. So with that, I'll say, hey, good luck and good grazing, folks. And there's my information. Jared, do we have time for any questions?
Yeah, we probably got time for at least one good question here. We appreciate it, Jim. What a great opportunity. Appreciate you sharing your contact information.
I think you already had it anyway.
Yep. So with that, yeah, be sure to thank him. Any questions from the chat here real quick? Or you can also unmute and raise your virtual hand.
Guess not.
So
I guess I was too thorough.
Well, you did a good job. I think it was great.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was excellent. I think the one this might take more than one question, but as you visited other ranches throughout the world, are there one or two or three commonalities that you see amongst successful generational ranches, things that might stand out that just you'd say, okay, if they can get this right, their likelihood of success is going to be greater?
Okay. Here's a few things I would throw out there. They changed their perspective of ranching from being a livestock-based business to being a land management business. That is the first mindset that really has to change. And it has to do with where are we invested in our assets. Most ranches have at least 5 to 6 times as much invested in land-based assets than in livestock-based assets. If we think about profitability as return on assets, it becomes obvious we need to focus on the performance and output of the land, less so the individual animal. 2, become aware that everything starts from healthy, productive plants on the landscape. I often say grass feeds the grass feeds the soil, then grass can feed the livestock. If the starting point is just got to feed the cows, you're probably going to go broke. But if your starting point is you got to take care of plants and soils effectively, then the livestock come along, basically as a free ride. So those are key things. I see we are right at 12:30 and I don't want to delay the process.
That is perfect. We appreciate that. And yeah, I know we had some other questions in there. Feel free if you have time to stick around there, Jim, and want to answer any of those in the chat, you're welcome to.
I'll look in the chat and I'll do that.
Yeah, anything or resources or things, and absolutely, Jim's good about responding to emails and things. And so I don't know if you're trying to retire or not. I don't know if anybody will ever let you retire, but I know at some point maybe I know you are kind of wanting to scale back on the consulting side, but we appreciate your willingness to continue to share the knowledge and wisdom that you've gained from a lifetime of experience, Jim. It's been a pleasure to have you on here, and thank you for being here with us.
It was a pleasure, and Jared, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Very good.
All right. I hope the rest of the summit goes real well for you.
Well, thank you.